Hello, welcome to Rob, Ryan, Red, the Wrexham podcast brought to you, as always, by Red 10 People Development. On today's podcast, we'll bring you all the latest Wrexham transfer rumours, take a look at where the Red Dragons need to strengthen this summer, and finally, we will get around to answering some of your emails as we have promised for a long time now. So as always, you can get in contact with the podcast, Rob, Ryan, Red, on all the socials. There's also robryanred.com and robryanred@gmail.com. Like I said, we will be reading out some of your emails towards the end of the podcast. Nath, how are you doing?
I'm good. We're doing that early record again because we're both at a game later, so I'm hungry. Normally, I've eaten by the time we do these night records, but we're doing a day record. I'm very hungry, but I'm good. Busy week, work wise, but Wrexham, it's been fairly quiet in Wrexham land, which isn't something you get to say very, very often. It is going to get very, very hectic. I'm sure, the conversations I've had with various people, but I am good, feeling pretty fresh after the end of the season, and quite intrigued to see who ends up joining us in League One. Crew against Crawley in the final. Who saw that coming a few weeks ago?
Certainly not us. I think we really sort of besmirched Crew on the last couple of podcasts, so apologies to them. Fair play to them for turning it around the way they did. Sensational to see MK Dons just obliterated in the manner that they were. And I love what you say as well, Nate. Quiet week of Wrexham, a quiet week in which season 4 the Docks renewed. The women's team are off on their own Rex Coast tour. That's a quiet week by Wrexham standards at the moment. One thing I do want to address is we put a clip of the podcast out last week. And thank you very much to everyone who's been following them on sort of TikTok, on Instagram, on the platforms we've been putting the video out. And this podcast, the plan is to go out fully on YouTube as well again. We want to do more YouTube. Someone asked on one of the clips, what have I got on the blind behind me?
Yes.
So basically, I record in the loft at the moment because it's the best for sound acoustics. When I got the house, came in, viewed the house. You know, the problem with buying real estate, I know this isn't very Wrexham related here, is there's so many issues and little things that you just would never see viewing a house. One of which was every time I'd come to see the loft, the blind was always open. So, just took it for granted that it had a normal blind on it. It was only when I moved in and, I dumped loads of stuff into the loft, didn't actually go up there for months. And then one day, the sun was in my eye, so I pulled the blind down. And the Disney film Cars?
I do know the Disney film Cars.
Well,
who doesn't?
This here is essentially like planes. I'm not sure it's official sort of Disney merchandise, but it's a children's bedroom essentially, and that's a children's blind, and it's one of those It's one of those little sort of quirks that I'd love to change long term, but when do you get the time to change a blind?
So you're just sticking with the planes. That's good.
Stick with planes.
Just embrace it.
Speaking of planes, we've got some news ourselves, haven't we?
We are jumping on a plane. People have been asking, are we going to get out to the preseason tour? All of it? No, we're not. But some of it we are. Rich, you can confirm which of the locations we are going to this summer.
America's been and done, mate. People broke America decades and decades ago. Canada is the untapped land of maple syrup, of ice hockey, of saying "a" at the end of every sentence.
Of Ryan Reynolds.
Of stereotypes. Can't wait. Absolutely can't wait. Tim Hortons on every single street corner. We are going to be meeting up with as many podcast listeners as we can as well. So if you are going to Wrexham versus Vancouver Whitecaps, drop us an email, drop us a message, like we said, Rob, Ryan, Red, on all your platforms. Let us know. We would love to meet some of you. And we will also be in Vancouver for most of the week building up to the game. So we want to maybe do a watch-along for the Chelsea match, which we won't be going to. And we've got the women's games as well that week. Not sure if they'll be televised as sort of widely as the men's games, but if you are in Vancouver, that week leading up to the Vancouver Whitecaps game, which is like the last week of July.
We're there the 23rd. We fly out on the 23rd from the UK, and we will land that evening, and we're there until the 28th. So if you've got recommendations of what we should do, I've been to Vancouver before. Rich has never been. I went many years ago, 2017 I went. I'm sure it's different. Things have changed a little bit now. But yes, we want to meet as many of you as possible as we can. We've had a couple of emails saying that you're traveling across Canada and you're going to be there and you want to say hello. that is our aim. Want to meet as many of you as possible. Myself and Rich are both going to be out there. We're going to vlog the trip as I did last time when I went out to LA and North Carolina. So get
We
involved,
will
get
also
in
be
touch.
recording a podcast at some point as well. So if you are in
Some point.
Canada and you want to be on that podcast, you let us know. We will make it happen. We will do a impromptu record wherever it is that we end up.
Yes.
As we mentioned as well, Nate, the women's team are also going on their own Rex Coast tour. Those games have been announced. July the 19th, they take on SoCal FC at Drake Stadium in LA, UCLA Drake Stadium. July the 21st, they take on Tigres Femenil under 19s at the UCLA Drake Stadium as well. And then they finish their tour on July the 26th, Portland Fawns Academy at Providence Park, which is going to be phenomenal. What an event that'll be. So, yeah, it's a shame that we'd booked our flights about 2-3 hours before that announcement came out. Otherwise, we might have been able to adapt the schedule a bit more. But yeah, really looking forward to it. And it's one of those things, Nath, where we keep on talking about this being the off season and the quiet part, but it feels very, very close before that new season sort of takes off.
Yeah, I'm really chuffed for the women. I think you saw in episode 3 of the documentary Phoebe and Rosie and Lily and all these jobs they've had, and yes, they've gone semi-pro. And Rob was talking about wanting to pay them more. I think this is real payback in a way that you're able to break new ground. Women's football in the US is huge, and I think there'll be a strong appetite for those games. UCLA, I think the SoCal game, I think they're playing a kind of combination of UCLA and USC, maybe. I think it's like a combination team, like all stars sort of. I'm just really intrigued to see how they get on. Just to see how they fare, what the interest is like. The doc is out now. Women's focus in that. I don't know what the ratings are, but I'm sure that they're good. We'll get onto it. But doc been renewed again, as you already said, for season 4. So great, the women's team are out there, and for us, hopefully we'll get to see some new players. And BC Place is a huge stadium. Vancouver's an amazing city. I'm sure lots of people will be going there. First sort of Wrexham game in Canada. It's going to be an exciting summer, and before you know it, it'll be new signings and fixture release and new kits and all the good stuff that comes with an off season. So exciting stuff, mate. I'm buzzing. I'm really looking forward to it.
Mentioned their season 4 of the doc being renewed, which will obviously focus on Wrexham men's first season back in League One. It will focus on the women's team looking to go even better in the Adran Premier, looking to see if they can become a top 2 side, maybe even if they could put together a title bid, try win the cup final that they obviously lost this season. From the men's point of view, Nath, it's going to be such a compelling season at the dock, isn't it? Because this is the question has always been, look, first 3 seasons are great because we win every single week, and we're going to be right at the top. And again, we are not being pessimistic. We're just being realistic. We're saying Wrexham will not. This might not be the boldest call all the time. Wrexham won't win League One next season. I'll put it out there. I just don't think we'll win League One next season. I'd love that to be the start of season 4, by the way, and then flash forward to lifted it. But we probably will be mid to higher in the table next season, somewhere from 10th upwards. And again, you don't know what really happens there. It's just going to be so compelling, isn't it, to see what happens if we do have a quiet season on the pitch where we don't achieve anything, we don't win any titles, we don't win any silverware, we don't win promotion, we don't have a cup run. Just really intrigued to see what happens. And that isn't failure, by the way. Just because what happens next season might not be at the standard of what we've had the past 2-3 seasons doesn't mean that that's failure.
I'm really intrigued by some of the, we saw Huddersfield this week when an appointed Michael Duff, really accomplished manager at, in the Football League at that level. They'll be really, really good. I think Huddersfield, Steve Evans, he's not everyone's favourite. He's not everyone's cup of tea. He's not everyone's favourite, but they'll be very, very good. Rotherham, they will just spend money. Birmingham, we don't know Tony Mowbray's situation, Gary Rowett, but that they'll have the biggest budget in the league by far. Stockport are going to go for it. Mark Stock gave an interview this week, their owner, saying that he's aiming for the playoffs. He reckons Dave Challoner might want to temper that down to maybe top 10, but he wants the playoffs. They're looking at trying to sign Louis Barry permanently, which I think would be a fabulous signing if that happens. And we'll put them in the mix. Wrexham are going to go for playoffs again, aren't they, or top 10? All to play for. There's some great Barnsley. They're going to be right up there. If Bolton don't go up, they're going to be right up there. Peterborough, I wrote a story today about how Peterborough have just had a bid rejected for Chris Con Clark at Altrincham, who had 23 goals 12 assists. He's 22 years old. So, he is someone that I no doubt Wrexham have at least got their eye on or have had a look at. It's possible to ignore what he's done this season. So, League One, I don't think there's an obvious runaway winner. And so I think it makes it very, very compelling. And it should make for very compelling TV as well.
Could be interesting to see our League One predictions. I think
God.
next week maybe you'll be able to see how our League Two predictions fared. I am dreading that video because, I'm not going to lie, when we got promoted to League Two, I was just so Wrexham centric. I didn't really give a shit about the other 23 teams. And I think that shows in the predictions I made for the season. So we will see how they transpired. Nath, what we have been sort of speculating ahead of the window really gathering pace. I mean, for a couple of League One teams and League Two teams, and the season's not over yet. They've still got playoff finals to play, so you don't really get transfer activity until the end of this month, really, until sort of June, because the season is still ongoing. Premier League teams, of course, don't finish till this weekend. So, and then they've got the FA Cup final, they've got Champions League final 1st of June. So transfer activity we'd expect sort of around early June to start gathering pace. Obviously, Wrexham will fly out for their preseason tour mid-July as well, so you want to be having as many players available for that as well as possible. We've been looking at the squad depth. You put the graphic out on social media this week. We had loads of good interaction on that as well, so thank you very much for doing that. Nath, if you're watching this on video form, is about to put this graphic on screen now. If you're listening in the traditional podcast sense, then we will talk you through it anyway. But it's Wrexham's squad depth chart heading into next season. Already slightly outdated because Scott Butler, of course, has now left the club, so Wrexham are even further depleted at centre-half. As things stand then, Nath, do you want to kick us off with goalkeeper and the defence?
Yeah, so if we look at the goalkeeper, that is a pertinent issue for Wrexham. There's no getting away from it. Arthur, you'll be able to find this quote while I go through the goalkeeper depth, Rich, but Arthur gave a quote to Sutty, who's been on the podcast a few times in The Athletic. He's written a really good piece. Do go and read that because there's a lot more than just this quote, but he is asked about his future. Arthur Okonkwo is not on this graphic. His loan has ended, and in my opinion, it doesn't sound like he will be coming back to Wrexham. Rich, have you got the quote of what he said about his future?
So Arthur said, I haven't looked too much into things at the moment, but I will very soon. It is about looking at all my opportunities and seeing which is the best for me. And then this sounds like the breakup to me. I've loved it at Wrexham and they will stay in my heart forever. To me, that's the kicker. That's the look. We know for a fact he's had offers further up the pyramid and from across Europe. We know that. The risk for Arthur next season is that you've got guaranteed League One football and the possibility of promotion, or you can go to the Championship straight away and probably starting for a team every week. So I would not begrudge him whatsoever if he wanted to join another club this summer. I also would say that, look, if you can get Arthur when we're in League Two, although he's an exceptional goalkeeper, I do think we'll be able to get someone of similar quality in League One. You could either buy someone permanently, and again, that was the caveat against Arthur. We said we need a goalkeeper who can come to the divisions with us. If we can't sign Okonkwo permanently, then we need to maybe sign someone who is younger this summer who can be that keeper for 5 or 6 years going forward.
Well, what I would say as well on Arthur is I really don't think it's wise to get drawn into a long drawn out saga. Will he stay? Won't he stay? I think you need to nail down that position. It's a key position, as we found. Arthur made a big difference, after the mess of the start of the season with Foster. And if you look at the depth right now, you've got Mark Howard, who's going to stick on. And, we saw in the documentary how he ended up dropping out the side after the disaster class at Stockport, albeit he says he was sort of blameless for those 5 goals. Luke McNicholas, who barely had a look in. And you and I both know that there's some frustration there, Rich, from Luke's side with how few opportunities he did get. And Liam Hall, very young goalkeeper. He'll be part of the TST squad this summer.
I think it's worth pointing out there, Nathan, that McNicholas, by all accounts, had joined Wrexham when we were in non-league with the proviso that he would one day be the number 1, or certainly be understudy to Mark Howard. And then obviously Foster comes in, and Okonkwo comes in, and he's never had those chances, and it's hard to see him ever getting those chances, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I just don't know. I feel like it might have been a sliding doors moment for McNicholas, that once Okonkwo came along, now you've gone up again. He hasn't had many opportunities, many reps to show his quality. Will he get that in League One? I'm not so sure that he will. Liam Hall is the sort of third, what will be the fourth choice keeper. Very young, a great education for him working with some much more experienced pros. But you wouldn't expect him to play at all for the first team in any competition next season. That includes the Bristol Street Motors. So that's the situation with the goalkeeper. And if you look at the defence, as you say, Rich, I put this graphic out, and of course Scott Butler, it was announced that he was leaving as soon as the graphic had gone out, which leaves you really with Tom O'Connor and Will Boyle as left centre-back options. Owen O'Connell is your only real true centre-back, middle centre-back option in the back three. And Max Cleworth and Aaron James. Aaron James has played, has he made one start for Wrexham in the league, which was against Salford City. We were the first to break that news at the time, I think.
Was he right back in that game as well, was it?
I think he was a right back or right wing back in that game. I don't
Yeah.
think he played centre back. So, you see there that any injury to Owen O'Connell, Max or Tom O'Connor, suddenly you're quite sure. You're not quite sure. You're very sure, actually.
Yeah.
And what do you need? 3 centre backs? Do you need 2? You need a couple at least.
Yeah, I think you need 2 because you have got you can move things around. You can put George Evans in defence, but obviously he's much more effective as a defensive midfielder, as we'll get on to. And, there are there's a few bits of the jigsaw that can be moved about, but certainly not as many pieces as we had in the past. And certainly going up the levels as well. You don't want to have that drop off in quality. It might be fine saying, look, Evans could play centre back, but then you've lost such a key player in midfield who'll be even more important in League One. So while I do understand that certain players can be played out of position and things can move you around, I do think centre-back is a real pertinent issue. So we're saying straight away here, goalkeeper essential, at least 2 centre-backs is crucial as well. Argument for 3, but obviously that is far easier said than done, particularly to get players who are of a quality that's required. You then move into the wing-back area as well, Nath, don't you? Which are interesting because right wing-back, I think we're okay. You've got Barnett, Bolton, Ford. Obviously,
Is that
difficult.
Is that too many though? Is that too many right wing backs there?
I think there's a question, isn't there? This was the question when Luke Bolton signed. Is what does he do differently to Barnett? Obviously, he likes to cut inside a lot more. I'd say he's more direct. He's got electric pace. But Ryan Barnett went up a whole new level, didn't he? After that Bolton sign, the last few months of the season, he was incredible. Anthony Ford, is he League One quality anymore? I like having what he offers. He's a more defensive sort of wing back. He offers you more protection. Brutally honest, you do just question whether, even for his point of view, does he want to be third choice in League One? If there's going to be movement there, I'd say it's probably Ford who's the most likely to leave this summer. On the left, you've got James McClean, who I think is much better as a centre mid. I don't really want to see him on the left in League One personally. And then you've got Jacob Mendy, who, it's no surprise. We do sponsor him, Rob Ryan Red Podcast. We sponsor his away shirt. Is he good enough to play League One week in, week out? I've not really seen that yet in his career. And also, his injury record is quite concerning. Obviously, that's mostly down to bad luck, but you probably need protection at left wing back as well, just because I think McClean goes to centre mid permanently, in my point of view. And then you'd have Mendy as an understudy or second choice by someone else.
Yeah, that's the thing. Does McClean end up going into a central midfield role? I think for us, he does, and for some other fans, but for Phil Parkinson, does he? And if the answer is no, then you've got 2 left wing backs. I love Mendy. I love the potential he has, but you also have to be realistic and say that is he as robust as you need over the course of a campaign in what is going to be a very tough season again. And there are question marks over that. Ford is a case of, I think, what have you done for me lately? You see, Barnett have a flourish, and then, I
was going to say, the other thing on Mendy is he's 27 years old now, so we keep on saying he's got this potential. Well, when's he going to push on to this next level that we maybe need him to?
Is that Jesse Lingard where he's like, oh, he's just a kid, and then he's like actually 33
yeah,
or something?
This guy's 33. Yeah. He might say beans all the time, but this guy's an actual grown-up sort of senior player now. And I think that's the same with Mendy, partly because of the way Mendy broke into football and the way he came from Boreham Wood, that when you look at him, you think, oh, this guy's 22, 23, but he's 27 now. And brutally honest, at 27, you've got to be in your prime, and at League One level, he needs to be good enough to be starting every week. And like we said, I'm just not quite sure. If you do want to be a playoff or title competing side, I'm not sure he's good enough to start every single week, but he's certainly good enough to be part of the squad.
Yeah, definitely. We're definitely not advocating for Mendy to be moved on, but I think that is an area of concern if you go into the season with McClean and Mendy as your only options. Quickly, two things I wanted to say. One, did you see the video of McClean and Mullin in the gym? James McClean is a fitness freak. There's no other word for it. The guy is the fittest player in the squad by a mile. He is the consummate pro. And I think, whatever you think of him as a person, and people, Wrexham fans not so much, but other people outside are very critical of things he's done and things he said. Purely in terms of football and in terms of setting an example and showing you there's levels to this game, I think he's incredible. He doesn't drink, he trains. What Ben Foster was talking about, he's the first one in the gym and last one out, and that's always a typical cliche people use. But in McClean's case, he'll play a game and then go box in the gym. And he's an animal, mate. He is. I'm floored by his fitness. It's incredible. So I have no doubt now that he'll be a key piece and can play a lot of games next season. He's just a fitness freak.
We won Wigan's Player of the Season, didn't he, when they were in League One? So he can certainly do it. Even sort of that's 1 year out of League One he's had, but he is so dedicated and such an elite athlete that no doubt whatsoever that he will play sort of 42 league games next season. That will not surprise me whatsoever. He's an absolute beast. He's such a consummate professional and such a key player to have in the squad. And again, he is evidence of the incredible recruitment Wrexham have done, because Moneybags Wrexham buying a player like him in League Two, you could easily come and just sort of rest on your laurels. I'm James McClean. I've been in the Premier League. I've played at this high level. I don't have to do much more. But it's the fact that he's been like, no, I've still got an example to set. I still want to be the fittest player. I still want to be the best player at Wrexham. I don't want it to be my previous reputation that I'm living off. I want it to be what I've earned here. And he's been, I absolutely adore him. And,
you do.
Obviously I know some fans might object to him and they might not agree with him, but for me, I just absolutely adore James McClean. And I think he's had such a good sort of example he's set on the squad as well, because he's lifted everyone else's level.
Rich, is he your Luke Young? Is James
maybe
McClean to you what Luke Young is to me?
Yeah, maybe he is.
He's your Luke Young, I can tell. And secondly, what I wanted to say, thanks for the people that you were talking about clips last week on Instagram and all that sort of thing, Rich. The one that got quite a few responses, more than the others, was, what position do you want a captain to play? Now, we did put a poll out, and the answer that came back was midfield. I won't out the person who said this, but somebody did vehemently disagree with your take that it cannot be a goalkeeper, Rich. I also had plenty of people that said I was talking absolute rubbish and it cannot be a goalkeeper. So lots of good debate. Thank you for the messages on that. I stand by that. I think it shouldn't be a striker, but again, some people did come back and say it has to be Mullin. It can't be anyone else. So if you haven't seen that, on our Instagram page, we passed 4,000 followers on there. Thank you so much after the call out last week. And hopefully we'll be able to keep clipping up little parts of the podcast. If Rich says enough headline-worthy stuff, then I'll be able to clip it up.
Yeah, it's like the journalists have become the content here, haven't they?
Exactly. So, Rich, take us through then into midfield. So we've gone through. So far, what have we got? What do you think we need? We need a left wing back, 2 defenders, and a goalkeeper. That's 4
at the moment. Yeah, and that's maybe being a bit conservative with it. It's the fact that, look, I've been having this chat this week covering Man United as my job. We were speaking ahead of the Arsenal game on Sunday. How many Man United players can you get rid of this summer? And we got to a tally about 14, 15 players who United should get rid of. But this isn't FIFA. The reality is they get rid of 6 or 7, at max. Because even with Wrexham now, we might get to sort of a number of 7 or 8 new signs by the end of this video. But to actually go out and do that and to get players of the quality you want is so much easier said than done. And the sort of warped nature of modern football fandom is that on Football Manager, on FIFA, selling a player is so easy. Buying a new player is so easy. You don't have to do background checks on their personality. You just buy whoever you want with the best overall rating or best potential. And it's that easy. There is so much more to it in real life. So, the numbers we say might not end up being true, but as it stands at the moment, new goalkeeper, 2 centre-backs at least, and a left wing-back. Move on to midfield. George Evans, we saw last season, is basically irreplaceable at defensive midfield. You've got Tom O'Connor who can come there, come and play there. But if he plays further up the field, then you're losing one of your centre backs already, and we've only got 2 at left centre back. So again, I think at League Two and National League level, that's something you can facilitate. But long term, we all know Tom O'Connor looks better as a ball playing centre back. So George Evans needs. I still think we need someone who can come in and offer him some sort of backup. It's just very difficult to go out and get that player, because you're basically saying to them, when George Evans is fit, you ain't playing at all. So it's a very, very hard sales pitch in that regard. You then move into centre midfield. On the right side of centre midfield, we've got Andy Cannon and James Jones. Andy Cannon will start every week if he's fit enough. James Jones, he's had his own injury issues. He was a very useful player in National League and League Two, but even in National League, there was some people who just didn't think he was good enough and didn't offer enough to the team. So do you perhaps need a more suitable alternative to Andy Cannon, someone who can come in and have the same sort of passing range and influence of a game when he's not there? You've then got Elliot Lee and Jordan Davis. Elliot Lee starts every week. Jordan Davis, he's had his moments, but for me, he needs maybe a season in League Two or to get his confidence back. It pains me because Jordan Davis is a fan favourite. He's a local lad. He's one of Wrexham's own. Is he good enough to play in League One? I'm not so sure anymore.
Look, we've already said you could move McClean inside into midfield. You could move O'Connor into midfield, and you could play Mendy and Boyle and any new signings. But I think if you look at that midfield, you look at how delicate it is in terms of 1 injury, 2 injuries. And remember, previously we've seen Jordan Tunnicliffe at centre back and Aaron Hayden centre back both got injured in that same game against Sheffield United, right? So you can suffer multiple. You can be very, very unlucky with injury. Now, Elliot Lee played a lot of games. He played every game, didn't he? He featured in every single game for Wrexham.
And his influence on games dwindled a little bit towards the end of the season because he was so knackered.
Yeah, it waned, but he played a lot more minutes than everyone else. Andy Cannon finished with a flourish, maybe started a bit slowly. James Jones had his injury problems. I think it was more serious than they initially anticipated. And like Ford, he was just a non-factor near the end. He's a really interesting one, James Jones, because he scored one of your favourite goals since the takeover against Altrincham. And, his effort level, you can't really fault. It's just when we go back to League One, is he at that level, or is he part of that group where they are solid deputies, they are solid backup pieces that are quite hard to find and quite hard to convince players to be? They were quick to extend his contract when they weren't quick to extend Luke Young. I thought that was quite telling. I think it was around December time that they gave James Jones a new contract and didn't Luke Young. I felt like that was a bit of a signal that they were quite keen to keep one and not the other. I think James Jones will get plenty of minutes in terms of as a rotational piece, regular bench player that will come on maybe with 20 minutes to go, provide you a bit of energy, some legs. Jordan Davis, if he doesn't go, which I don't think, given he's opening his business, Croyce Howell, I think had a drinks event the other day, if anyone went to that. I don't think he'll be in any rush to move on. So the onus is on Jordan if he doesn't want to leave on loan or leave permanently. The onus is on him to really knuckle down in pre-season and make a case that he can be, as we go up a level now and the technique will be more apparent and maybe the physicality will reduce ever so slightly, that it will, be an opportunity for him to rewrite the script that in League Two he's had a very frustrating campaign. So I think the ball was in Jordan's court there. Can he be the man to dovetail with Elliot, or have we seen the sort of beginning of the end for him? I think the ball is fully in his court. And as for George Evans in central defensive midfield, yes, he had an injury and we managed to cobble through this time. But I don't think you'll get away with it again in League One. I think you do need to find, an alternative to him in case he's injured. And I get what you're saying, Rich. That's a hard sell. But you look at that midfield there and you say 1 injury, 2 injuries, and suddenly everything could unravel pretty damn quick.
Yeah. So if we're saying midfield then, we're saying 2 new players, keep everyone and get 2 new signings?
I'd say keep everyone and get 2, yeah.
Yeah, if you can. So, I mean, I've got another point to make, but I think we'll get onto strikers before we do this, because the quirk is we've got too many strikers, but we also need a new striker.
Yeah.
So if you look at our graph at the moment, we've got 7 strikers contracted for next season. The ones who I think are certain to be involved are Paul Mullin, his understudies Jack Marriott.
Yeah,
You've
they're
then got
going to be locks, yeah.
then Ollie Palmer and his understudies Stephen Fletcher, basically. And then for me, you bring in a 5th who is actually going to go above Palmer and Fletcher in the pecking order.
Right.
And then for me, you've still got Waters, Bickerstaff, and Dolby on the books. Parkinson loves Sam Dolby. He thinks he's one of the most intelligent players in the Wrexham squad. He loves the way he reads the game. He loves everything. Maybe he just lacks a bit of confidence in the final third. But for me, Sam Dolby, I just don't see that there's a need for him next season because he would be 4th choice in that role behind a new striker, Palmer, Fletcher.
Rich, I think Sam Dolby is Phil Parkinson's Luke Young.
Yeah,
I think that's his Luke Young. No,
his
I
surrogate
agree
child.
His surrogate child. It's a funny one because if you do you loan Dolby out until the expiry of his contract? Do you loan him to a
Jake Hyde
Morecambe
style?
or Jake Hyde style? Do you loan into a Morecambe or do you loan to a Southend? I mean, they'd love to have him back. I don't think he needs to drop 2 divisions personally, but
I think he earned his right to play in the Football League.
I do as well, but I think a team like Morecambe, where he was at previously, I'm sure they would take him given their issues around players' sales and kind of embargoes and this and that. I'm sure they'd take him. I think Sam Dolby's route to minutes next season is incredibly convoluted, and I don't see him playing much at all. Maybe outside the Bristol Street Motors. Billy Waters is returning to his parent club as per Doncaster's retained list today. They are not going to take up the option to bring him back. That's unsurprising. And Jake Bickerstaff, deemed not good enough, but deemed surplus to requirements by the new management at Accrington. I think he scored 1 goal there. It didn't set the world alight. Maybe for him it's a National League loan to really go and get a lot of goals under his belt. It's difficult to say, but he's on a much longer contract than both Waters and Dolby, who I believe are out of contract in 2025.
So the other issue that we've got in all this, Nath, is so we're saying right now, goalkeeper, 2 centre-backs, left wing-back, 2 midfielders, and a striker. That's 7 new signings for Wrexham.
I think that's a minimum. That sounds crazy. I know that sounds crazy. That sounds a minimum.
That's what I mean. That's being conservative. That would be 7 new additions. The goalkeeper would not be part of EFL squad registration rules.
Yeah, good shout.
So based on the players we've just been through who we're keeping, Wrexham would be keeping, by our logic, 18 players for next season. There's only room for 4 more senior players to be registered in your squad. So if you want to sign 6 outfield players, 2 of them would have to be under the age of 22, is it?
Yes. Loanees. Hey, look, I was at the under-18 Premier League national final on Tuesday night at Stamford Bridge. Now, while I'm not saying that all of those could come in and do a job, I'm not saying that at all. There are players in those kind of teams. Man United won it, Chelsea, Liverpool. There are players you could get. I mean, I'm banging the drum, and he got pelters, and our mentions were getting flooded, Rich, when Max Dean had an absolute stinker for MK Dons.
Yeah, I was thinking about sending you a message here saying this is a disgrace that we've put so much backing behind this guy.
No, I'm doubling down. I'm standing on it. I'm saying get him in the building because
you're standing on like he stood on the fire of the Crawley player.
I'm stamping on my shout like he did on that Crawley player. I'm saying get him in the building. I don't care. You can keep atting me and tell me how horrendous that shout was. He's going to end up going to like Peterborough or somewhere like that just have got a great development record, or Birmingham or well, they haven't got a great development record, but he'll end up going somewhere good, and I think Wrexham should be in the mix for that. You've got to be clever because, yeah, like you say, if we're keeping all, I mean, you totted them up 18. We need players that are gonna be under the age cap. Then, a player that can get round it. Is there a 20-year-old you can go and get, a 19-year-old who maybe isn't a regular starter but can provide a bit of competition to James Jones or to George Evans or something.
You mentioned
like that.
2 on this podcast already. You've already mentioned that essentially what we need is our own Louis Barry, who has been released by Aston Villa and would likely go to Stockport this summer. That's one where he's a player who could go there. You've mentioned Chris Con-Clark, who's 22 years old, who could go to Peterborough. I mean, he's done exceptionally well at Altrincham. He's a real talented player, someone who I think is definitely of a Football League quality. Maybe he would be a perfect understudy for Elliot Lee. You look at someone who we had an interest in last season, Charlie Savage at Reading. Difficult to buy him. Obviously, they've got their own financial issues, which are hopefully being eased now. He's 21 years old. But I agree with you, Nath, that we need to be looking, again, especially because next season, there is less of a pressure to get promoted. So I think lots of fans would be happy if you did bring in 2 or 3 sort of 21 or under year olds and said, look, these guys aren't going to be starting straight away, but we're going to give them a year in League One. We're going to still give it a go to get promoted. And then eventually these are the guys who take over.
Rich, what I would say, you look at that graphic, before I take the graphic down, you look at that graphic and you say it is brimming with experience. Fletcher, Palmer, Mullin, Marriott, Elliot Lee's been around for a while now, O'Connell, McClean, Howard, lots of Evans. These are not young, inexperienced bodies. These are a dressing room full of players who, in McClean's case, have played international level, have been capped. Fletcher, Premier League level, capped. Mullin's played a hell of a lot of games, as has Palmer. Marriott's been up, as high as Championship playoff final has he been? I don't think he's been in the Premier League, but, players like that. There aren't many Max Kluwerts in that squad, and I think you can get away with a couple more.
Exactly, and I think that the interesting thing this summer for us is that this is when our transfer strategy changes, because the last 3 summers have been focused on immediate short-term success. That has been the focus for Wrexham. We have produced and nurtured some young players at the club, but there hasn't been an expectation to do so. There's a long-term expectation too, because we used to have the centre of excellence. We've always had that at our core, that when times were tough, we produced young players, sold them on for a profit. That was our strategy. Now, because of money, we don't have to look for the best players in North Wales anymore. We can look for the best players globally. Theoretically, we could look in North America. We've got so many links to so many clubs that where we cast our net is over a much wider field now. Do you cast a net over a field? Definitely don't. Definitely in the deep sea. We've got to go deep sea diving for some new talent. But the point is that this summer is the first summer since the takeover where you can start looking to the long-term plan, recruitment-wise, because we've already achieved what we wanted to do, which was get into the Football League and then get into League One. A lot of Wrexham fans, we're all dreaming of going to the Championship and Premier League one day, but most Wrexham fans will be quite happy if that takes 2 or 3 seasons, and that's a minimum. Let's just enjoy where we've got to already. Lots of Wrexham fans, the majority of us would say League One is where we feel we belong, sort of a mid-table to upper half League One team, which is what we should be aspiring to be next season. But for the first time since the takeover, it feels like we can buy players with a plan to a longer-term plan rather than, look, you're coming in to get us promoted.
Right then, Rich, I'm going to take that off the screen. And a bit of transfer news? Do you want
yes,
that?
You've been the guy on this, haven't you? Yeah, you're not wearing a yellow tie today, but...
No yellow tie. Transfer news then. So, firstly, what I would say is this time of year, you're going to get random accounts. EFL Hub 123 says Wrexham are going to bid for Kylian Mbappe or something stupid.
Well, speaking
Ignore
of
those
stupid
accounts.
transfer rumours...
Go ahead.
You went on BBC Wales this week to speak about one, didn't you?
I thought you were going to say you put some stupid transfer rumours out this week, didn't you? I did. I was getting asked on BBC Wales about Jamie Vardy and that whole situation. Purely, I'm blaming Humphrey for this, who I saw recently the other day. But I'm blaming Humphrey because he just didn't rule it out. He didn't acknowledge it. He just said, "I'm not. We're not ruling anything out."
We've got to say
suddenly,
we both know how journalism works. Whatever Humphrey had said to that would have been a story. It's either Humphrey Kerr rules out Wrexham move for Jamie Vardy. He either stokes the flames by saying, "Yeah, why not have him?" or just even sort of shrugging his shoulders and saying, "Coy." He's very coy on the rumours, isn't he, Humphrey? It's like we know how journalism works, and it's just I despise it because the irony is. When it comes to sort of Man United, you and me having to churn out these lines at times where we're having to link players, even though we're having to read into quotes that aren't quite there. and now it's a
Yeah.
taste of our own medicine. It's just
Yeah.
seeing Wrexham in cheap headlines all the time. It just,
Well, very, very quickly, what I'll say on Jamie Vardy, it's very appealing to him. I don't doubt. Great for his profile. I'm sure his wife Rebecca would love to rebuild her brand and her profile with the help of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney and Caitlin Olsen. No doubt, it's not very appealing for Wrexham. Wrexham shouldn't or should not become, and I hope will not become, a Premier League retirement home. Having one Stephen Fletcher is one thing. He scored some great goals, but we cannot just start farming. You Jamie Vardy's will turn 38 next season. A great player, scored 14 goals last season, 13 goals. Was on an absolute wedge, probably the Championship's top earner at Leicester.
yeah.
And
And
go to the US, Jamie. That's what I'd say. Go to MLS. Go to Hollywood. Go make your brand that way.
yeah, you don't need Wagger for Christie to sort of lift the lid on that one. The other
Yeah.
thing is, he plays the similar sort of role to Mullin, so he'd effectively become again as Mullin's understudy. He's a very deluxe understudy to have at League One level, Jamie
God,
Vardy.
if Leicester fans get a hold of that clip about Jamie Vardy being likened to Paul Mullin's understudy, we are going to get roasted beyond belief.
Well, you
let's
don't
get
clip
to
it
some
then, mate.
No, let's get to. Well, I probably will now. Let's get to some proper rumor. Sounds wrong because I know it is concrete info, but Joe Rafferty, right? Player, defender at Portsmouth, been released by Portsmouth. A name that's doing the rounds. Lots of interest from top end League One, I'm told. That doesn't include Wrexham. Okay, so if Joe Rafferty is on your bingo card, strike him off as things stand. Wrexham are looking for a wing back. That has been made known. It wasn't specified to me left or right, but I think given what we just showed you on that graphic, getting a right wing back would seem very, very odd. Wrexham in the market for an attacking wing back, and they don't believe Joe Rafferty is that. He is more defensively minded anyway, but obviously it's been part of that Portsmouth team that won promotion to the Championship. Strike that one off your bingo card. One to keep an eye on, Stephen Humphreys at Wigan. Leaving Wigan, couldn't agree terms on a new deal. Has been a player that Wrexham tried to get in January. Parkinson has watched a lot of Stephen Humphreys. Striker, that would suggest that, as you say, Dolby, Bickerstaff, Waters, what does it mean for them? Humphreys is not an archetypal replacement for Ollie Palmer. They are not the same. He has played wider, and it does make me think, is there, we say this all the time, is there a potential formation switch? Could you go McClean and Humphreys either side of a Paul Mullin in a 4-3-3? I mean, that would be a massive step away from what Phil Parkinson's done, but he would have the players to do that. McClean looks comfortable in a forward role. Humphreys on the other side, very comfortable, and Mullin, I'm sure would be fine leading the line in a front three. Stephen Humphreys, one to keep an eye on as a free agent, I would say, Rich.
Also, was it Pearce as well at Wigan? I mean, we talk about
Tom Pearce.
Talking about, it seems like Wrexham want a left wing back, someone a bit more tap minded. I know Pearce is maybe not the headline name, or someone who is necessarily going to come in and be that stellar a signing necessarily, but again, just doing that sort of due diligence on players who are available. For me, you just got to aim as high as you can at the start of the window, haven't you? We've seen in the last couple of windows as well. I mean, Parky said, didn't he, last summer, that George Evans and Arthur Okonkwo, arguably two of the best signings Wrexham have made during the takeover period, they only sort of were available in the last few days of the window. So names we're being linked with now as well could end up, certainly being players of interest, but a player who we thought wasn't available could become available, and then the priorities completely change as well, don't they?
I also think, people were getting very irritated at that post that I put out about, that have contacted Humphreys, Josh McGuinness, and Tom Pearce about their availability. They're free agents. It's normal to scout out what are they looking for, what kind of role are they looking for, package, where are you living, what situation, yada yada yada. It's normal stuff.
So there's three things I want to point out here. Number one is football fans absolutely, and we know this, football fans absolutely hate transfer terminology. It's monitoring FC, it's looking at, it's sort of keeping tabs on. It's all just crap in it. But that's the terminology we're given. That's how you have to rephrase it. Number two, transfer situation is so fluid that things can change so quickly, like we said with Evans, with Okonkwo. And number three, this is just anecdotal, but when Man United signed Aaron Wan-Bissaka in 2019, the club sent us some little notes on the transfer, just so you have background on why the deal's gone through. And one of the bullet points, which is becoming famous now, is Man United claimed that they had looked at 804 right backs that summer, and Wan-Bissaka was the one who came up on top. So Man United, think about this, for one position, United signed 3 players that summer: Maguire, James, and Wan-Bissaka. For one position, they looked at 804 players. So Wrexham looking at left back, they might initially look at sort of 50 or 60 options before they get shortlists of 4 or 5 before they cut them down again. So if you see Wrexham look to a player, take it all with a pinch of salt, take it with a pinch of Nathan salt, but also realise that, look, there's so much more to happen yet. But also, just because you see a transfer rumor, it doesn't happen, doesn't mean it wasn't true at one stage either.
I was going to say, is that the most polite way for you to discredit my story? Is that what you were going to? I felt like you were just
not whatsoever. I'm saying make your own mind up. Make your own mind up.
I thought that was listeners. I thought on viewers, I actually thought Rich was being very, very polite there to say that what Nathan's written is probably not going to happen, and take it very much with a pinch of salt. But no, look, like I say, things are fluid. Enjoy it. We get lots of emails about. Darren, I'm sure he won't mind me saying that was one of the people who emailed saying, "I'm crying out for some transfer news. Just want a bit, to help pass the time." I get it. It's fun. We call it silly season in the industry. It's, it is ridiculous. You get linked with a whole manner of players.
Can you imagine doing this podcast 10 years ago and talk about transfer rumors though? Like,
would we even have a rumor though? Like, would stuff even come out?
It was just all like Christian Dennis, and who was the guy at Altrincham we always linked with? The guy who had his own.
Damien Reeves.
Reeves. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, now we are a big name, and the other perverse quirk that I just can't get my head around is agents use Wrexham's name to tap up interest now and to draw interest in their players, which is absolutely obscene. Like, it's
all one big game. There's clubs, there's scouts, there's agents, there's even execs. There's a lot of people spinning the plate because they want to put pressure on a player, maybe to book the ideas up, or the player wants to get a new contract, or they want to drum up interest, start bidding. There's ulterior motives to a lot of these things, but Wrexham are a big fish now, and that will annoy people. But I'm hopeful, Rich, that Wrexham get their business done early. I'm hopeful that when we're out there in Vancouver for that final game, we are looking at the team that starts the season. I hope we're in the stands at BC Place, drinking whatever beer they serve there. I'm sure it's not Wrexham Lager, and we're seeing a group that we look at it and go, yeah, they can go into the season opener against whoever it is. We'll know by then, because what we don't want is be going to Vancouver with respectfully with just Howard and McNicholas, and we don't know the goalkeeper situation, and we still haven't got any midfielders, and we've still got Dolby Waters, and I think they've got some tough decisions to make, and we need to make them quick.
Yeah, I mean, also on that though, I'd say I remember Tozer signed just before the start of the season. Like we said, Evans signed just before the end of the window.
Yeah,
and looking back to last summer, I'm pretty sure that the team that played most of the preseason games didn't have any new signings in it.
Right.
Am I right in thinking that? I'm thinking, just looked at the Chelsea game when we lost 5-0. I don't think anyone who played in that game was a new signing last summer.
Was Will Boyle in the building by that point, or I don't know. I feel like I vaguely remember
Boyle
his
was on the bench,
head.
I think, wasn't he?
On the bench, right.
But that's what I mean. Like pre-season, I still think that while I'd like to see us do our business early, I don't think we'll play our cards that early. I think we will leave it late again.
Okay. Well, let us know if you've got a player that you would love to see that isn't called Max Dean. If you want to join that bandwagon, let us know. robryanred@gmail.com. Rob Ryan Red on all the socials. You guys on Instagram and TikTok as well. They're doing really, really well. So thanks for the support on them. And yeah, so if you agree with Rich, let us know. Because are we going to be a slow burn, or are we going to be quick out of the blocks? And if we want to get Chris Clark, as Rich mentioned, we need to get a move on.
So now, if we said we'd read out some listeners' emails this week, I'm going to throw this one to you first. This is from Ian Fowler, who's from Portland, Oregon. He says, "Hey, I'm a new listener to the podcast. I understand Arthur Okonkwo won't be resigned by his current club, Arsenal, and Wrexham do have an opportunity to sign him, as we've already discussed on the podcast, looking very unlikely at this stage. His question is basically, why would Arsenal not want to keep him in the first place? We've spoken in the past, Nath, that he'd be a very easy FFP flip for a team, that you can buy him in, sell him immediately, and just make a pure profit on him. So why would Arsenal not want to keep Okonkwo themselves?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Thank you very much for the email. Glad you found the podcast and hopefully you're enjoying it. It's a very curious one, and speaking to some Arsenal sources, talking of transfer terminology, Arsenal sources, there is a degree of confusion why they didn't extend his contract before sending him out on loan to Wrexham, just as purely as a protection and to make sure they get a fee. But look, Arsenal are moving in a different direction. David Raya has come in. They've shown they're not scared to make big calls on goalkeepers. You've seen Aaron Ramsdale get cut. He could be moving on. And I just think the path to prosperity with Arsenal is too great. They are going for Premier League titles, Champions League titles. As good as we think Arthur is, I don't think any of us would expect him to be at that level right now in his development. It's more curious to me that they didn't do a better job of protecting themselves, making sure they got a fee, and even offering him a deal, Rich, because that way they would have maybe guaranteed themselves some compensation. But obviously, if they offer him a deal on similar terms and he accepts it, then they're back to square one, paying X amount per week, and they're paying a large amount for that. His younger brother is in the academy. Maybe he'll be the one that they look at and use in a similar role. But I think for them, Okonkwo is not going to get into the Arsenal setup. And if anything, they're being quite fair in allowing him to walk freely, no compensation. He can go to a club, do very, very well. And I'm no doubt they'll keep an eye on him. But yet, to answer the email, there's definitely plenty of people at London Colney that are puzzled by the fact he wasn't extended before he went out on loan to Wrexham.
Another email we got, Nath, is to do with the Liga MX deal Robin Ryan have struck for. I mean, I got the pronunciation sort of research when I had Sooty on. I think it's Nikasa or Nikaxa.
Nikasa, right?
Nikasa. Okay. We got an email in here from Yash Singh who says he's basically a massive fan, and he's also a fan of Liga MX. He says, I'm an American fan from Texas, so I'm very familiar with Liga MX as it's very popular here. In fact, it is one of, if not the most watched leagues in the US, thanks to our large Mexican, American, and Latin population. It is because of this I ask Wrexham fans to be optimistic but rational about this club agreement. Because of the media darling that Liga MX and its top teams are, it is a no-brainer that Rob and Ryan have invested in it, as they've invested in F1 as well. It's also not surprising they picked the team they did, which has its own star-studded ownership group, which had Ava Longoria and Mesut Ozil on the board. He says, while this will be good for Wrexham and its outreach outside of the US, as well as bringing extra funds on, I've seen people talk about bringing Mexican players to League One. This is where a large issue rises. Liga MX has some top players, but as a league, it has heavily fallen in recent years. To Europeans, it is still seen as the top league in North America, because if we're completely honest, the bias against MLS in Europe is evident and never-ending. But Liga MX has fallen hard behind the MLS for the last few years. MLS teams now routinely beat Mexican counterparts, which was unheard of a few years ago. Rampant mismanagement and favouritism has driven most top players out of the league already, with the remaining ones not being worth much except for a few expensive individuals. This has even affected the men's national team, who have been in free fall in recent years, and as in any of its players choose to play in Liga MX, it's only to collect an easy paycheck rather than to play abroad. It's why teams won't sell their top players for anything less than the top of the market fees, and why many players prefer the easier and larger paycheck of staying in Mexico. It's caused a lot of fans in Mexico to become disappointed with the league, national team players, and the Mexican Football Federation. Just look at the comments of tweets after any US and Mexico clash, and much of the blame is placed on the recent consequences of the Mexican League and the football landscape in Mexico. I just ask all of this is taken into account as Wrexham fans speculate about being able to dip into the player pool in Mexico. There are not a lot of players who can compete at League One level, and those that would be very, very expensive. Some Wrexham fans might ask why not an MLS team, but considering MLS teams are being valued at top-end Premier League levels, $300 million plus, it's not surprising that Robin Ryan went for a cheaper league with a more established media presence, even if, for now, the MLS has more potential on the field with better players and in the market with a new Apple TV deal. So yeah, a lot to get in from there, from Yash, basically saying why Wrexham have gone from a Mexican team rather than an MLS team, and why we will not be seeing any sort of Mexican sort of imports this summer in North Wales.
It was that's really interesting email, and I always like to hear from people who know far more about certain subjects than we do, and there are a lot of subjects that people know a lot more about than me and you, Rich. One of which is Liga MX, and friend of the pod as well, Jamal. He's based in Texas as well, and a big Liga MX fan, and he was telling me similar that there aren't a huge number of players that you would believe would cut it starters in League One. So I'm really curious. I'm more curious that can we convince Billy Waters to go to Necaxa or Naseka for a year? He'd love it, I reckon. He's got a great personality. He's very popular. He probably likes tequila now and again. He enjoyed himself in Vegas. I would love to see Jake Bickerstaff or Billy Waters sent for a season on loan in Liga MX. I don't know if that's possible in terms of the actual timeline.
Sounds like you're sending them there.
Not.
Sounds like
Probably the timeline of the season doesn't match up, so it's.
Well, it sounds like you're not giving them much choice, to be honest, mate. So
no,
congratulations.
I'm saying, pack your bags, lads. Pack your bags. But also, could you imagine just the Mexican media if Jake Bickerstaff and Billy Waters turned up as a new strike partnership? Very, very enjoyable. I would be making sure we got out to Mexico to cover that. I'd find a way, Rich. I'd get United to fly us out and Stoke can sponsor the trip. I'd find a way.
Vancouver will have to do for you. Like I said, Thank you very much to all your emails as well. robbrownred@gmail.com. Again, another shout before we wrap up this week's podcast. Your dream transfer for this summer, any transfer targets you think we should discuss on the podcast, let us know. robbrownred@gmail.com or the contact button on robbrownred.com. If you're heading out to Vancouver, let us know. We will try to do a meetup. We'll try to get you on a podcast, whatever. We would love to meet as many of you as possible. We're trying to make it happen. So, really looking forward to that. Naif, thank you very much. You're going to be able to bring us some more transfer news next week?
That's the hope. Got to get on the phones and get busy. Busy boy. So it's, we'll see. It's, like you say, who knows? Wrexham are... Phil Parkinson said himself, there's a certain culture you need to get, there's a certain character, and there's a certain price they're willing to pay. So I'm working on a few things, working to try and get some of these release players on the podcast. We are trying, one of which I'm sure will be no surprise to anyone who's listened for a while. But we shall see. It's coming soon, I hope. So, keep your eyes peeled on Rob Ryan Red on X and on Instagram and TikTok and wherever. And get in touch. We're going to try and read more emails this summer. We've got a little bit more time. And I'm going to wave because you'll be watching this on YouTube. Certain people, we're back. So it's not as maybe jazzy as it was before, but you can see our faces. I'm also wearing, this is not sponsored, but I'm going to shout him out because he's very, very friendly and ex-player. Jake Hyde has got a set of caps out called Sleepy Sloth. So if you want one, I'm modelling one. He's not going to upload me apparently as a model, Rich, on his Instagram page. But
that's a shame,
here
isn't
I am.
it? That's a shame.
It's a shame. I messaged him while I was on holiday, and I said, "Look, here's the cap," and he was like, "Oh, nice, cool." Not like can I? He didn't care. He didn't care. So if you want one, Sleepy Sloth. And if not, I will see you next week, Rich. We'll be back.
We will be back. Thank you very much for listening, wherever you are in the world. If you are watching this on YouTube, please give it a like and subscribe there. Any other platform as well. As always, please just share the word of the podcast around. Word of mouth is the best way for it to grow. Thank you very much. Big shout out to Red 10 People Development for their continued support of the podcast. Thank you as well to Wrexham-based band Hypnotic for letting us use their music, The Stings, in the show. Take care, and we'll be back again next week.